Hey guys, I know it's been a long time since I've seen you. I miss you guys, and so yeah, we're just gonna start doing video lessons this way. Um, I'm hoping by the end of the week that I get to be actually in person with you, but here we are, and we'll just do this until now. Until then. So, we are going to be talking about the intolerable acts and as that goes and progresses into the Revolutionary War. I know you guys watched some videos about the Revolutionary War and the different battles and how France came into the fight, and you guys got a whole new amount of information. Well, we're going to backtrack a little bit so we can dive deeper into it rather than just having a surface level understanding. So the colonists saw the intolerable acts as just entirely intolerable, just absolutely intolerable. And so what they decided to do is they decided to send representatives from each of the colonies to all meet in Philly or Philadelphia in September of 1774. And they wanted to figure out how to respond to these intolerable acts. And this was known as the First Continental Congress. So we know now that Congress means the legislative branch of the United States. So the Senate and the House of Representatives both make up the Congress in the United States government. Back then, Congress just referred to a fancy word of saying meeting. And the continental aspect is that representatives came from many different locations to all meet together. So Continental Congress together, meaning people meeting from coming together and meeting from places all over. This was the first of its kind, and they called it the First Continental Congress. So, from here, they used the Continental Congress to figure out how best to disagree or to negotiate with the British policy. And the policy, of course, being the intolerable acts that were placed on them. One of those intolerable acts being the fact of the Quartering Act, where the soldiers were able to stay and be housed and fed by the colonists, no questions asked. And there's a whole list of the parts in the act that we've gone over. And so they wanted to figure out how they could negotiate with the Parliament or the Britain's government. And in the First Continental Congress, all the colonies together chose to push the boycotts harder. One of those boycotts being on tea. They even decided to send a petition called the Virginia Declaration of Rights. Now, the Declaration of Rights is different than the Declaration of Independence. That'll come in later. But the Virginia Declaration of Rights, they decided to send this petition to King George III, and it really was just informing him that the colonists feel that they should have their rights protected by the government. And these rights are the right to life, liberty, and property. Now, the right to live is pretty what they're asking for and being protected by the government, which should be. Liberty, so their freedom. And then property, so the ability to own property. All of these, they believe, should be all of these should be protected by your government the second you're born. That's what they're trying to push forward. At this point in history, though, they're just saying, as an Englishman, that they should be granted these rights and protected by the government. They also told the Suffolk resolves, which is the leaders of the Suffolk County in Massachusetts, to form militias. Now, militias are made up of Minutemen or just regular colonists that could come together in a minute's notice. Why they call them Minutemen? A minute's notice to fight for their town, for their people, for their rights. So the only types of armies that the colonists had were these militias. They were just made up of your regular townspeople. So a blacksmith, a farmer, a clerk, just regular people. They weren't trained to be, shooting guns or anything. Hopefully they had some practice at some point in their life, but outside of that, it was just, please fight for us and help us. And those that signed up were on the militia. And in forming these militias, they were really just preparing for the worst, which was war. They didn't know how King George III was going to respond to their petition of the Virginia Declaration of Rights. They didn't know how they were going to respond to harsher boycotts. So what they did was they just prepped by making sure to have militias in place in case something were to go wrong, like really wrong. Well, King George III, instead of repealing or taking back the Intolerable Acts, he decided to send more troops to Boston. Now, what he just said by doing that to the colonists, he just told them, no, I don't care about your rights. They're not my priority at all. My priority lies in the fact that I should rule. I have the power. Listen to me. And I will show you that by sending in more troops. So you really have to listen to me. Now, when there was a divide already, between the colonists and the British troops and King George III, his rule, it doesn't really help when you add more troops to that and you don't listen to the cries of the people. So, having more troops in Boston and these militias formed, there was actually a lot of different spies at that time in the Massachusetts area. Now, with there being spies, a lot of different information was being found. So there was spies for the British troops, and then there was spies for the colonists as well. And in this, General Thomas Gage is the governor of Massachusetts, but he is also the general commander of the British troops in North America. So General Thomas Gage, ended up finding out that there was an arsenal of weapons that the colonial militia, so the colonist army, was storing all of these weapons, which storing your weapons in somewhere is called an arsenal. And so he found out that the colonists were storing a huge amount of weapons in an arsenal, a storage area, in Concord. And so that one's just right outside of Boston. I will show you with this map, that's fine. Okay, so we've got Boston right here, and we've got Concord over here, not too far. This is the state of Massachusetts. Boston is our capital, so Boston, Massachusetts. So, with that, he was very against the fact that the colonists could be possibly planning something to oppose King George III and Great Britain's rule, because he, General Thomas Gage, was the commander of the British troops. So he expected that they would fall in line and listen to exactly what was being told and ordered of them for the colonists. So he set out to have people destroy the arsenal of weapons in April of 1775, as well as arrest Samuel Adams and John Hancock, which were both founders of the Sons of Liberty. And he was going to arrest them in nearby Lexington. Now, to give you an idea of what that might look like, here we got Boston. You follow the path. We've got Lexington, that's where Samuel Adams and John Hancock will be arrested, and then they'll keep moving on to Concord and finding this arsenal of weapons that they would like to destroy. Now, this brings into a whole mess of things. So, that was in April that he ordered that. On April 18th, 1775, a spy for the Sons of Liberty came across a British army preparing to march. And this spy ran to tell Paul Revere and William Dawes, which were both members of the Sons of Liberty. Revere told a man named Robert Newman to keep watch from a steeple in the Old North Church in Boston. He told him to light one lantern if the British were coming by land, and light 2 lanterns if they were coming by sea. Now, 2 lanterns were lit, meaning that they were coming by sea. And so, William Dawes and Paul Revere both pretty much jumped into action, and they both went from 2 different locations. Now, green is William Dawes, and pink is Paul Revere. So Paul Revere, what he did was he hopped in a canoe and rowed across the way, and then hopped on a horse and took his midnight ride from Charleston all the way through Lexington and to Concord. And the whole way he was shouting, I'll make sure that I'm saying the right thing, but the regulars are coming out. Yes, the regulars are coming out. Now, the regulars are coming out is a secret code for saying the British are coming. They called the regulars, the British, the regulars. So, he was shouting that. Well, William Dawes took the land route. So, what he did was he did green. So, he went from Boston and went around all the rivers and all the different water landmarks, and went around and then kept going and going. And then Paul Revere hopped into the canoed across, hopped on a horse, here's Charleston, and rode through Charleston, Lexington, and all the way through Concord. Now, from there, what they did was the local militia, so the colonists' army, heard Revere and grabbed their weapons. And when the 700 redcoats are the Great Britain's army, because they wore red coats, so 700 of them reached Lexington around dawn. About 70 Minutemen, 70 colonists, were waiting. So in this battle, it is 700 redcoats, 700 British troops versus 70 colonists or 70 Minutemen. The British troops are outnumbering the colonists by 10 times the amount that the colonists have. Not really a fair fight at this point. Both sides were ordered not to fire unless fired upon. And to this day, no one knows who fired first But once that first one fired, all shots rang out.